Okay, perfect. So I will be bailiffing as well. And so normally we would say all rise, but because we're on Zoom, I'll just say all rise. So first, I'd like to introduce our judge for today, which is Mr. Hansberry. So thank you for judging this trial. So as we get started, so in the case of the people of the state of Michigan versus Danny McGrew, Mr. McGrew is on trial for murder and is arguing for self-defense. Mr. McGrew, how do you plead?
Not guilty.
Perfect. With that being said, can the prosecution please start and give their opening speech?
Yes. Your Honor, my name is MCGREW. I'm one of the prosecutors of this case. It is my pleasure to represent the people of the state of Michigan. Before we begin this trial, we must accept one universal truth. Mr. Barney Quill was killed. It is an irrefutable fact, it is simple, and it is clear. Mr. McGrew, pistol in hand, shot Mr. Quill in the head. He laid there, lifeless, soaked in his own blood. The events that took place in Rick's bar, in which Mr. McGrew was the full-time bartender. The two men had a dispute over the $400 that Mr. McGrew owed to Mr. Quill, who within his rights is entitled to demand the money he lent back. After a brief exchange of words, Mr. McGrew retrieved a gun from a compartment within the bar and shot Mr. Quill right in the head, killing him instantly. Ladies and gentlemen, this trial is about a defendant who's trying to subvert the justice system. We are gathered here today to examine the motives behind his crime, which he himself knows full well. The fact of the matter is whether Mr. McGrew did or did not do this in an act of self-defense. But isn't it rich, though, that the defendant is playing the victim role when it is he himself that single-handedly shot a man? No doubt the self-defense card is an easy one to play, degrading the murder that the defendant committed in the name of justifiable homicide. There is simply no such thing in this context. The prosecution will present the evidence and the truth will become self-evident. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
So now may the prosecution call its first witness to the stand, Mr. Lowe Bauer. Yep, Mr. Bauer. Can you repeat after me? I solemnly swear that I will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I solemnly swear that I will tell the truth,
The whole truth,
the whole truth, and nothing
but the truth. Okay. Can you please give your witness statement?
Great. I, Lou Bauer, state, my name is Lou Bauer. I live at 205 Melrose Avenue, Stateville. I am an apprentice plumber. I had worked late and stopped at Rick's and had several beers and watched a little TV. There was hardly any business, and the bartender was drinking right along with me. The bartender was a big jerk towards me. When there was a news story about something the ACLU was doing, I said I supported it. The bartender then said that they were nothing but dirty commies. After that, the bartender called me comrade and pinko. I was deeply insulted by that. When the man who was eventually shot walked in, he sat near the end of the bar, and the bartender went over him. At that point, a little after 11, I decided to go home. As I headed for the lavatory, the bartender and the one who got shot seemed to be getting heated up pretty well. Then I heard a crash and moved back to the bar room. On a flash, I saw the customer was holding a bar stool as he might throw it. It was about 6 or 8 feet from the bartender. He screamed, "I'm going to wreck this place." Then suddenly the bartender had a gun. The other guy stood there and then said, "No." He seemed to be starting to back away, hit the bartender and fired at him, and he fell. I can't figure out why the bartender shot him. The bartender said in a nasty voice, he asked for it and I gave it to him. The bartender looked really pale. I went over to the victim and saw that he was shot in the head. He was in a pool of blood right in front of the bar. I couldn't find any pulse and called the police on the payphone. In the meantime, the bartender had put the gun on one of the tables and sat down, and a friend of the bartender had walked in. First, one policeman came, and 10 minutes later, some others arrived, and we were all taken to the police station.
Thank you. Can the prosecution now have their direct examination so you can ask questions?
Can I begin when ready? Would you say that you come to the bar often?
Yes, I would. I always come when I'm done with work. So
So you
yes.
say that you have a pretty well sort of knowledge of the bartender's behaviors.
No, not really. I come sometimes, but sometimes it's a different person. So.
Does the bartender who was there that night, did he routinely take in drinking when you were at the bar as well?
Yes,
Would you say that his drinking was sort of inhibited his ability to perform his job or potentially inhibited his basic motor functions?
yes, I would.
Would you say this is an inappropriate behavior for a bartender to act in such a way?
Yes, I would.
Moving forward, would you say that Danny McCrew appeared in distress or was anxious after the shooting?
Yes, I would.
Would you say that Danny seemed to be satisfied with his actions, as in the witness statement, he was mentioned to sit down and talk to a friend or colleague afterwards?
Well, no, I wouldn't say that because he was pretty distraught after that, but probably talk to his friends about it, like as if he made a mistake or yeah.
Would you say that Danny seemed to be satisfied with his actions, as he quoted, "He took care of that"?
I would say that he said that because he was panicking.
When it is mentioned in the witness statement that Danny seemed annoyed with his friend after the friend tried to follow up, would you say this is the case?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that, please?
In the witness statement, it says that Danny seemed annoyed with his friend after the friend asked what happened with the murder. Would you say that this is a case that he did indeed sound annoyed?
Yes, I would.
Did the bartender seem aggressive towards you as an individual?
Yes, I would say that.
Do you think if things had escalated when the bartender called you a comrade, that he would have become physically violent towards you?
I would probably say that, yes.
Did the bartender's actions make you feel unsafe at all or physically threatened?
Yes, I would say that.
Did you see the man throw the bar stool or just threaten to?
I would say that he was just threatening to.
So to clarify, you did not see him actually throw a bar stool.
No, I did not.
Did the victim at hand appear physically threatening or intimidating, taking both height and physique into consideration, considering it was mentioned he was 5'7"?
I would probably not say that.
Did the victim seem to be imposing immediate harm to the bartender?
No, he was not.
Was the victim in an immediate proximity to the bartender in which he could have inflicted great harm? Meaning, was he close enough to sort of inflict great damage?
No, he was not.
Do you think the bartender at hand acted in an unjust manner to the victim?
Yes, I would say that.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Can the defense now cross-examine?
You said you were drinking that night, correct?
Yes.
Can you remember everything in detail?
Well, when I walked into the bar, and well, I just came back from work and decided to take a couple of drinks, and well, as I said, I was watching the TV and saw something that the ACLU was doing, and I just said that I supported it, and he replied back calling me a comrade because he probably disagreed with what I said, and then after that, the victim came in, and then they got into an argument. I can't remember exactly what the argument was about, but it got heated up, and he said, the victim said that he was gonna wreck this place, and then things just got heated up, and then the bartender shot him in the head.
So to clarify what you just said, the person you first heard to shout would be the victim, yes?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that, please?
The first person you heard that escalated the confrontation would be the victim, correct?
Yes, I will, but yeah.
did you hear exactly what the argument was about? At any point, were you the one that actually heard what they said?
I did not hear anything they said. I was in the restroom when they were having the argument. I just noticed that the victim screaming, "I'm going to wreck this place," and then that's when I first heard everything, heard the argument.
So you cannot be sure who was the first person that made an aggressive move.
I wouldn't say I would be really sure, but the bartender was already pretty aggressive towards me when I had a different opinion. So it was in my mind, it was probably the bartender who heated the argument, because the victim just came in and he didn't seem to have any problems with anything.
So at this point, you're not sure if it was the bartender. It's just speculation on your part.
Yes.
At this point, would you say that you have a biased opinion on the bartender?
Objection.
Sustained. You want to rephrase?
Would you
Yes.
say that your interactions with the bartender affect your opinion of him?
I would not say that.
So you're saying that your interaction earlier in the day, when he said called you comrade or pinko, did not affect what you think about him as a person?
No, I didn't. No, I wouldn't say that.
So even if you felt insulted, you wouldn't automatically assume that it was him that made the aggressive move.
No, I did not.
So how can you actually say or infer that he was the one that made the aggressive move in the first place?
Well, when I was in the restroom, the first person that I heard of raising a louder voice was the bartender. I was not sure what it was about, but it was him who raised the voice. And then I thought maybe from that on, it was his. He was the one who maybe started the argument, but I had no bias on whether I had no bias on my experiences with him earlier on.
So to clarify, you changed your opinion when you earlier said that it was the victim who raised his voice first, yes?
Objection. Single line of questioning.
I'm going to allow it. I think she's made a point. But at the same time, I think you've made your point. So go ahead.
So at this point, we cannot be sure who raised their voice first, who made the first aggressive move. We cannot be sure because there was no witness other than the witness right now, and he was not there present. That's all my questions. Thank you.
So that will be it for the prosecution's witnesses. So we'll now start with the defense. Can the defense give their opening statement?
Good afternoon. My name is Sohee Yim, and I am one of the defense attorneys of this case. It is my pleasure to represent Mr. DANNIE MCGREW for today's trial. Ladies and gentlemen, this case is a kill or get killed self-defense situation. It is about a man who is left with no other choice but to protect himself from death. A man whose entire family depends on him. A man who has everything to lose if he chooses to do nothing. DANNIE MCGREW is a supportive and sweet friend who is quite popular amongst his peers. But most importantly, he's an extremely hard worker that cares a lot for his family. His bedridden brother and 3 younger sisters all depend on his employment at Rick Thunder Bay Cafe. Working diligently day after night to provide for his family, he worked hard to balance both his day and night jobs. His number one priority was to put a roof over his siblings' head and put food on the table. However, his sole focus started to shift, making him choose either life or death after his uncanny encounter with a possible alcohol addict. McGrew was panicked, frightened, and agitated when he stared death in the eyes over an unexpected inebriated encounter, until he found his one way out, the pistol. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the defense will call one witness to the stand. We will call Mert Johnson, who will provide further compelling evidence, such as their friendship and interaction after the event, to further prove that DANNIE MCGREW acted in self-defense. At the conclusion of the case, we would like you to find the defendant not guilty. Thank you.
you. Now can the defense call their first witness to the stand, which would be the defendant, Mr. Danny McGrew. Mr. McGrew, can you repeat after me, please? I solemnly swear that I will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I solemnly swear that I will tell the truth.
I think it's, yeah, call, yeah,
No,
and then make it Mert Johnson. Sorry, go ahead. Will.
Apologies.
No worries. Yep, go ahead. Sorry, I solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Perfect. Now, can you please read your witness statement?
So I'm employed as the night bartender at Rick's Thunder Bay Cafe, a bar in the city of Thunder Bay. I graduated from Thunder Bay High in June 1985. I live with my brother, who is bedridden, and my 3 sisters, ages 4, 5, and 6. My father left us 5 years ago. I support my family. I had a couple of jobs before I began working at Rick's. The owner of Rick's is Rick Cooley. I was behind the bar when Barney came in. There was hardly anybody else there. Barney acted drunk. I had 2 drinks. I owed Barney $400 for a car I bought from him 8 weeks ago for $1,000. I paid a $450 dorm and was supposed to pay the balance 2 weeks later. I did pay another $150 2 weeks ago, but wasn't able to pay any more after that. He kept coming in all the time for his money, even though I promised I'd have it for him by next Friday. I didn't know him very well. He was a friend of my cousin, who is 5 years older than I. My cousin told me that Barney could get really mean when he was drunk. My cousin lives in San Diego now. He got mad when I said I still couldn't pay him. Then all of a sudden, he picked up a bar stool and threw it. It almost hit me. Then he picked up another one and yelled that he was going to wreck me. Right then and there, I thought I could be killed. Rick keeps a pistol behind the bar, and he showed me how to use it when I started working here. I had never fired it before. After he picked up the second stool, I grabbed the gun and pointed it. When he didn't stop yelling, I shot him. I was terrified. I didn't know what he'd do. I have known Barney since 1985, when he got out of the Marines. He was always bragging about how tough he was.
Perfect. So can the defense now have direct examination?
Ms. McGrew, do you mind if I start by asking you a few questions about the character of Mr. Quill?
Sure.
Your cousin said that Barney could get mean when drunk, correct?
Yes.
And Barney also had a history of bragging about his strength, correct?
Yes.
So overall, do you think it would be safe to say that Barney had a reputation of being mean and strong, leading to a very possible chance of violence and assault?
Yes, I would.
Is it true that you owed $400 to Mr. Quill?
Yes.
Why was that?
It was because I bought a car from him 8 weeks ago for $1,000.
Would it be fair to say that you couldn't pay him the rest of the money at the time because you had to take care of your sick brother and 3 young sisters?
Yes.
And even when you had already made the majority of the payment to Mr. Quill, did Mr. Quill still pester you about the money even though you promised him that you would pay him on Friday?
Yes.
So not only was Barney mad because of the debt you owe, but also potentially violent, correct?
Yes.
Going back to the night of the incident, Mr. Quill had approached you demanding the money, correct?
Yes.
Then is it correct that Mr. Quill then threw a stool, then said he was going to wreck you, then picked up another stool?
Yes.
How did you feel when Barney approached you with the stool?
I was held back. I was terrified. I didn't think it was gonna get this out of hand. So I just did what I thought was the only thing I could think of at the moment.
And when you grabbed the gun, you didn't shoot it straight away, correct? You pointed it at Mr. Quill instead.
Yes.
But while you were but when you pointed the gun at him, but he continued to scream and walk towards you. So you pointed the gun at him, correct? But he still continued to scream and walk towards you. Is that correct?
Yes.
And at this point, how did you feel?
I felt like I could possibly die, and I didn't know how bad the situation was going to get. All I knew was that I had to protect myself.
So then you took a shot in self-defense, is that correct?
Yes.
How did you feel after the incident?
It felt very in the moment. I couldn't believe what just happened. It felt like it happened so fast that I didn't have enough time to think for better solutions. So I did feel I was scared. So yeah.
So do you think it would be fair to say that you also felt horrible even though he was threatening to harm you?
Yes.
And do you think that you were forced to take drastic measures because of Barney's past reputation and character?
Yes.
And do you agree that the fact that he was mad with you because you couldn't pay him right there and then also contributed to his anger and violence?
Yes.
So you also think it would be fair to say that because you're the sole guardian of one sick brother and three young sisters, that if something happened to you, then your brother and sisters would also suffer?
Yes.
So do you also believe that that this could have contributed to you being more defensive?
Yes.
Would you think it would be fair to say that overall you took the shot because you had to protect yourself and your siblings from someone that had a history of being violent, irrational, drunk, and threatened to hurt you?
Yes.
No further questions, Your Honor. Thank you. So now the prosecution will do their cross-examination. So, Mr. McGrew, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. So could you state again what your role is at the bar?
I'm a night bartender, so I just normally go there for my shift at night.
And could you restate what is your relationship with Mr. Quill?
I graduated from the same high school as him in 1985.
So as you stated before, you did know the reputation that Mr. Quill held. However, you still bought the car from him. Do you think that buying the car from him, knowing his reputation beforehand, kind of put yourself in that situation?
Yes.
Did you plan on giving the $400 back to Mr. Quill, even though you couldn't pay the full payment in the beginning?
Yes.
Did you give Mr. Quill any indication that you were going to give back the $400, as you say that you didn't know him too well in your witness statement?
Yes, I promised him that I was going to give it back, but he kept pushing me.
And since you knew Mr. Quill's kind of reputation that he had already, why did you choose to buy the car from Mr. Quill instead of going to someone else who you personally thought had a better reputation?
Because the money in the moment was, the price that he held was the only one that I could think that I could afford for with everything else. So yeah.
So you're arguing self-defense for today. So to be able to argue self-defense, there must be evidence of reasonability. And so you said that Mr. Quill held up a bar stool. So do you believe that the harm that a pistol can cause is equally reasonable to a harm that a pistol could cause at that time?
Wait, sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah. So to be able to argue for self-defense, you need some evidence of reasonability. So as you said in your witness statement, you said that Mr. Quill held up a bar stool, which is what caused you to shoot the pistol. So do you think that the harm that he could have caused you with the bar stool would be equal to the harm that you caused him with the pistol that you shot?
I wouldn't necessarily say so, but I think what he could do if we both got out alive after could be terrible too.
So just to reiterate, did you drink that night while you were working at the bar?
Yes, I had 2 drinks.
Do you believe that those 2 drinks could have clouded your judgment, and instead of acting in kind of self-defense, instead you acted irrationally just because you didn't know what was going on at the time and you weren't thinking super clearly because of the drinks that you had?
Objection.
On what grounds?
Speculation and badgering.
Can you rephrase?
Do you think there's a possibility that the 2 drinks that you had caused you to act not the same way that you normally would?
No, I wouldn't.
And finally, in your witness statement, you said that you shot the pistol because of his excessive yelling and you wanted him to stop yelling at you. Do you believe that excessive yelling is a reason to shoot a pistol at someone?
No, I wouldn't. But the way he was yelling was very threatening, and you could tell that he was about to get physical.
My last question is, at the end of the day, did you shoot the pistol at Mr. Quill?
Yes, out of self-defense.
No further questions, Your Honor. So now the defense will call their second witness, Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson, can you repeat after me? I solemnly swear that I will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I solemnly swear that I'll tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you. Can you give your witness statement?
Yep. I live at 403 Collingwood, Stateville. I was coming to pick up Danny. He gets off at midnight and we were going to go out to fool around somewhere after he closed up. It was a little after 11 when I got there. As I parked, I heard angry voices coming from inside the building. I looked to the window and saw Danny and this other person who I had never seen before screaming at each other. I later found that the person's name was Barney. Barney had picked up a bar stool and held it over his head. And then I saw Danny pointing out a pistol at him. They were talking to each other in angry voices, but I could not hear what they said. I looked at Barney and suddenly leaned back like he was going to throw the stool at Danny. Then Danny fired the gun and Barney fell. When I went into the bar, Barney was on his back and there was blood all over. The customer was kneeling down by the body. He said Barney was dead and called the police. Danny was behind the bar with a gun in his hand. Danny had a funny smile and said something like, "Well, I guess I took care of him." I asked, "What happened?" And Danny said, "I could really have been hurt." Danny was very agitated. I have known about Danny since we were in 3rd grade together. I would say we are fairly good friends, but I would never lie for him. First one policeman came, and 10 minutes later, some others showed up and took us all to the police station.
Thank you. Can the defense give their direct examination?
Can you describe what you saw through the window that night?
Oh, I saw 2 men arguing with each other. It was very violent. And a man attempted, it was Barney, attempted to throw a stool at Mr. MCGREW. And then Mr. MCGREW shot and killed Danny.
So can you confirm that Mr. Quill looked like he was going to throw or hit Danny with the stool?
Yes, I can confirm.
Can you also confirm that Danny was pointing the gun at Barney, but Barney still moved to throw the chair at Danny?
Yes.
So, can you comment on Mr. McGrew's character and what you know of?
Oh, I've known him since 3rd grade. We were fairly close, but he's a very respectable man. Of course, he owned a bar and he had to drink. That's the responsibility of a bartender, but I would say we were very good friends, but I would never lie for him.
Would you believe that Mr. McGrew would ever harm someone unintentionally and with malicious intent?
No, he wouldn't. He's not a person like that.
So do you believe that then this act was in self-defense?
Yes, I do.
Do you also believe that if possible, Mr. McGrew would take other measures to protect himself?
Yes, if possible, but that was in the sheer of the moment and he had no choice.
So to clarify, you're saying that Mr. McGrew had only one choice to defend himself?
Yes, because the chair was coming to him and the gun was there and he had to take measures to protect himself.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. So now the prosecution will give a direct examination. So Mr. Johnson, can you restate again what is your relation to Mr. McGrew?
Oh, I'm his friend. We've known each other since 3rd grade.
And just to reiterate, what was your clarity or vision of the event that happened that night?
Oh, I was in my car driving past, about to pick up Danny.
So based on the testimony that you said, you can confirm that you did see Mr. McGrew shoot Mr. Quill that night.
No, I couldn't, but there was a gunshot.
So in your witness statement, you stated that Mr. McGrew was smiling after he saw Mr. Quill on the floor. Do you believe that he feels any remorse for shooting Mr. Quill?
Oh, yes, of course. I think it was just out of shock. But anyone with any sense would feel shocked and saddened at killing a man.
So when you said that he stated, well, I guess I took care of him, do you feel that Mr. McGrew, just instead of wanting to protect himself, instead kind of took care of a problem of $400 that now he can use to spend on other things such as his siblings that he's taking care of?
Objection, speculation.
Sustained.
Final question, Mr. Johnson, did you or did you not see Mr. McGrew shoot the pistol and admit that he killed Mr. Quill that night?
I did not.
No further questions. So that is it for the witness statements. So can we have the prosecution give their closing statement?
Your Honor, you would have heard explanations from us and from them, but a verdict can only be derived from facts, and that is exactly what we presented. Your Honor, in fact, Mr. McGrew had already confessed that he committed a murder. Referencing the investigation report, Mr. McGrew, subsequent to the killing, said, and I quote, "I'm sorry, I made a terrible mistake. I got angry. I didn't have to kill." Yes, Mr. McGrew had no valid reason to kill Mr. Quill. It wasn't self-defense, and he admitted himself that he was angry. In addition, Danny McGrew was under the influence of substances. How can we safely say that we trust the words of this man? He treated his customer badly, used the pejorative to address his customer when they disagreed with him politically. He has all the qualities of an aggressor. Your Honor, a bar stool and a pistol, a flesh wound and a life lost. It is my job to present the truth. We are upholders of justice, not criminal sympathizers. Mr. McGrew shot and killed a man intentionally. He is a murderer and he should be treated as such. Thank you.
As far as the case for the prosecution, can the defense give their closing statement?
Thank you for your attention, ladies and gentlemen, on this very important case. The prosecutor didn't face a threat that night. The judge didn't face a threat that night either. And the other representatives here today didn't face a threat that night. Only one person did, and that is my client. He did what he had to do. None of us had to make the split-second decision that he did. And yet we are all asked to second guess him today. It was Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes who said, "You can't expect calm detachment in the presence of an uplifted knife." Now, there was no knife involved in this case, but the point is the same. People have to make split-second decisions in exercising self-defense. Sometimes people in hindsight should have or could have handled the matter differently, but hindsight isn't the measure we use when judging a defendant's actions. Rather, we analyze what happened from the perspective of how things looked at the time to my client. The alleged victim doesn't look so scary in the light of day. After all, looking solely on the facts that Quill is 5'7" is not the most intimidating height a person could be. But that is not the circumstance when my client used force. The man came screaming, yelling, with his hands all up in the air, ready to throw anything and everything at my client. The man's intentions were clear, asking my client for money. However, this dispute could have been simply solved by having a calm conversation. Self-defense is not just the stuff of law books. Self-defense is a defense that nature itself recognizes, a recognition that any living creature is going to act or react a certain way when faced with a threat. Self-defense is often something that police and prosecutors don't really understand. No one would walk up to police and prosecutors on the street and threaten them. That doesn't happen because the system would come down on them like a ton of bricks. It is people like my client, DANNIE MCGREW, who's left with no other choice but to react in his best interest. And now he's being judged for saving his life. My client isn't particularly big. He isn't the most prominent figure in the city, nor does he know a lot of people. However, McGrew's role as an older brother, the eldest son, and the most responsible person in his family has everything to lose if he chooses to do nothing. My client faces a serious offense. He is charged with a violent crime. His life is on the line. In fact, his family's life is on the line as well. Hold the state to its burden. A conviction in this case would be a travesty. Thank you.
And with that, that concludes our mock trial for today. Mr. Hansford, do you have a ruling or should we wait a little bit?
I have one, but I got to write something down here for a second. I have a ruling. I am interested in a couple of questions first, if that's okay. In the materials, it references a drawing, but it doesn't actually provide a drawing. Does that suggest like you're supposed to make your own kind of thing? Is that, I mean, when it talks about that, I'm not sure exactly how this works, but when somewhere in the materials it said, you know, there is this drawing which can be used in court, but did it actually give us one?
The drawing was really like weird. Like there are like 3 lines and like dots all over the place. Like, cause it was from like a different document, so you couldn't transfer over. So it wasn't like a.
Mentally, think about what you've been picturing in your head this whole time as you're talking about this case, everybody. What do I wish? So there was no drawing in the material, so nobody referenced the drawing. And it makes sense you didn't reference the drawing because we didn't actually have a drawing. If you had a drawing in your head, what are you envisioning? And why do I care so much?
In one of the readings, it said that he was around 2 to 3 meters away. And I think that might have some weight because if you throw a bar stool from that sort of distance, regardless of like your size, I feel like it's not going to create that much physical harm as compared to a gun. So,
and along that line, now, I hope you guys have not spent a good portion of your life in bars. Despite the fact that I'm in my 50s, I have not spent a good portion of my life in bars either. But I've spent enough of my life in bars to understand that a bar is usually higher than a table and wide, right? So what I'm mentally interested in is nobody talked about in this whole idea about, this is all about self-defense, about 2 things. How many injuries did the bartender have at the moment the gun was fired? And what other options did the bartender have given the physical setup? So like if I were asking questions of the bartender, I would have asked the bartender to hold up a stool the way the aggressor was holding up the stool. I have to assume that the person would have gone like this because you have to throw the stool over the bar, right? So if somebody is like this with a bar stool and you're behind a bar, what options do you have?
A duck.
Hide behind.
You can duck. You can duck. And very overtly in this kind of situation, you can duck and then lying on the floor, you can shoot at the ceiling and say, the next one's at you. Get out of my bar. So my line of, because there's no drawing, we never got into that. But my line of thinking is there are degrees of murder. We talked about this last year and they're different in different countries. But like 1st degree murder is like cold-blooded planned murder. I'm going to go find this person. I'm going to go kill this person. And this is how I'm going to do it. 2nd degree murder is sort of in the middle. And there's this thing in the United States. It's called manslaughter. It's when you kill somebody unexpectedly, often by accident. Like, you know, it would be manslaughter if, you know, you weren't paying attention, you were texting while you were driving and you accidentally hit somebody. You didn't mean to kill anybody, but you did. Manslaughter. Well, in a case like this, the things I would ask the bartender is, how many cuts did you have when you fired the gun? How many broken bones did you have when you fired the gun? The rest of those things, the obvious answer to which is none. And how did you manage to shoot the person while you were hiding on the floor? And the obvious answer is, oh, I wasn't. I was standing up and pointing over the bar. And at that point, my question is, okay, so you're not bleeding, you have no broken bones, and you're standing above a natural defense. Why didn't you just duck? And you know what else the bartender didn't do? The bartender didn't ask anyone in the bar to call the police. So the bartender could have said this: call the police, clear the bar. I'm going to sit on the floor and I'm going to shoot you if you come and get me. And then just sit on the floor with your gun. And if the person comes and gets you, you can shoot them. But the bartender didn't call the police, didn't get hit, stood above the bar, and in one shot hit the person in the head. Manslaughter. Wasn't looking for a fight. Didn't want it, got it, and rather than run, rather than hide, chose to shoot somebody in the head. So, for instance, I think Penelope did a good job tying the witness up on this. So you really did have a bias thing. And well, I couldn't let you go with the word bias. And you could probably see me when I sustained Hewen's objection about, I wanted to see if Jenna came up with this one. Well, you're a bartender. Do you encourage your drinkers to use guns after they've had 2 drinks? That would have been a good question. like, did this affect you? Is kind of speculation, but do you encourage your drinkers to use guns after they've had 2 drinks? That would have been a really damning question. But at the end of the day, what is most compelling to me is that the bar provided a natural defense and the bartender didn't use it. And that's why I'm really intrigued by the drawing, because if you had a drawing, I think people might have said, geez, there's a bar there. You can hide behind that. So I'd probably go with manslaughter. You guys do a very, very good job with what you do. And as I said to Jenna and Sohee, anybody who shows up for a mock trial at 3:20 on the Friday afternoon that starts a holiday is a hero. Pat yourselves on the back. You guys showed up for yourselves. Nice work there. That's the judgment. Manslaughter, guilty.
I think that is everything. Yeah, as Mr. Hansberry said, thank you all for showing up on like a Friday for October break. Definitely shows that you guys are really committed and you guys are all like super good. Some of you, this is like your first like mock trial and you guys all did like great. So yeah, definitely amazing job for that.
Yeah,
and
you guys, sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
You guys all did a really great job answering your questions. If you're a witness and if you're an examinator, then you did a really great job being very attentive with the answers the witnesses were giving, as well as asking all of the right questions. So we really appreciate all of your guys' efforts and really hope you guys have a great October break.
Mr. Hansberry, was the mock trial recorded?
Yes, this is all recorded.
Okay, could we get the recording at the end so we can send it out to everyone as well, just in case?
Yeah, it's going to take 5 minutes for Zoom to send it to me, but once I get it, I'll send it to you and Sohee.
Okay, that'd be perfect. So again, thank you so much for everyone for coming and have a great October break.
Yeah.
Take
Thank you.
care.
Bye,
Sohee, I want to
guys.
tell you one
Bye.
thing.
Thank you.
So if you can stick around for a second. So if there was one thing, I mean, by the time we got to closing statements, you can't introduce new evidence at closing statements. So I knew nobody was going to introduce the bar. So at the time we got to closing statements, I'm like, all right, this is going to be manslaughter. And then when you use the Oliver Wendell Holmes line about the knife, I was like, oh, like if there was one line, I mean, at that point as the judge, I'm like, all right, I know how this is going to end. And I was like, oh, that was good.
That was so good.
I don't know how you found that line, but I was like, that was the most difficult thing for me to get my head around, was the Oliver Wendell Holmes line about the knife. I was like, so when you're at the point at a knife point, you're not thinking I should dive behind the bar, or you're not thinking I should yell to call the police. You're just thinking about protecting yourself. I'm like, oh, that's a really good argument. So it didn't change it, but that was the hardest part for me, was that one sentence.
Yeah.
All right, anything else we need, or should I shut this off and send you guys the recording?
I think that's
That's
going
it.
to be it for today's meeting. Yeah.
Right.
Thank you for your time, Mr.
Thank you so
Hansberry.
much, Mr. Hansberry.
Have a good break, guys. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.